Before we dive into this remarkable story, if you find yourself moved by tales of quiet sacrifice and unexpected kindness, please take a moment to share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Sometimes the smallest gesture of connection can change everything, and your subscription helps us bring more of these stories to light. There are moments in life that cut so deep, so raw, that you carry them with you every single day, like a stone in your shoe that never stops rubbing, never stops reminding you. But there are other moments, rarer ones, that carve something else entirely, something that grows so quietly, so secretly, that by the time it blooms, it has already changed everything. This is one of those stories. This is a story about a man who had every reason to walk away, every reason to let bitterness eat him alive, but who chose instead to build something beautiful in the shadows. This is a story about Malik and Jasmine. And it begins, as all great stories do, with a broken heart. Before I take you into the depths of this remarkable journey, I want you to do something for me. I want you to think about the last time you felt truly powerless. Think about the last time you watched someone you love being pushed down, being told they weren't enough, being stripped of their dreams, and you could do nothing but stand there and watch. Feel that helplessness for just a moment. Because that is exactly where Malik found himself on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening in the autumn of 2014. And what he did next, what he chose to do with that helplessness, is what makes this story one for the ages. It was October 2014 when the first crack appeared in the family foundation. Malik had just turned 53 years old, an age when most men start thinking about retirement, about grandchildren, about the quiet pleasures of a life well lived. But Malik was not like most men. He was a security guard at a downtown office building, a job that required him to stand for 12 hours at a time, to walk endless corridors in the dead of night, to stay alert while the rest of the world slept. His knees ached. His back complained. His eyes, once sharp as a hawk's, now needed reading glasses to make out the fine print on the nightly reports. But Malik never complained. He was the kind of man who believed in hard work, in keeping his head down, in the simple dignity of earning an honest wage. His brother Terrence was a different creature entirely. Terrence had the gift of gab, the kind of smooth talk that could sell ice to an Eskimo, as the old saying went. He owned a small chain of laundromats scattered across the city, and though he wasn't wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, he was comfortable enough to feel superior to his younger brother. Terrence lived in a house with a white picket fence, drove a car that still had that new car smell, and wore suits that cost more than Malik's monthly rent. But the real difference between the two brothers wasn't money, it was the way they saw the world. Terrence saw the world as a place where order must be maintained, where everyone had their place, where tradition was the anchor that kept families from drifting into chaos. Malik saw the world as a place of possibility, where even the smallest seed could grow into something magnificent if given the right soil and sunlight. These two visions had coexisted for decades, rubbing against each other like two stones in a stream, but never quite cracking apart. That is, until the evening when Jasmine came home with her acceptance letter. Jasmine was Terrence's only daughter, and she was the jewel of the family. From the moment she could walk, she had shown a curiosity that set her apart. While other children played with dolls and toy trucks, Jasmine would take apart the family clock and put it back together again. She'd read encyclopedias for fun, would quiz her uncles on history, would spend hours watching documentaries on the human body. By the time she was 16, she had already decided what she wanted to be when she grew up. A doctor. Not just any doctor, but a surgeon, someone who could mend broken bodies and heal sick hearts. It was a dream that burned so bright in her that you could see it shining in her eyes whenever she talked about it. So when the acceptance letter came from the state university's pre-med program, Jasmine ran through the house like a child on Christmas morning. She was practically vibrating with joy, her hands shaking as she clutched the envelope. She found her father in the living room, reading the evening paper, his feet propped up on the coffee table like they were most nights. Dad, I got into the pre-med program." Terrence lowered his paper slowly. Malik had been visiting that evening, as he often did on Tuesdays, and he watched the scene unfold from the corner of the room where he sat with his cup of coffee. He saw Terrence's face shift from mild curiosity to something harder, something that made Malik's stomach drop. "Pre-med," Terrence said, repeating the word like it tasted strange on his tongue. "And just how are you planning to pay for that?" "The scholarship covers most of it," Jasmine said, her voice still bright with excitement. "I applied for grants too. I've been working on this for years, Dad. You know that." "I know you've been having dreams," Terrence said, and his voice had that sharp edge that Malik had heard many times before. "But it's time to think realistically, Jasmine. You'll be graduating high school soon. You'll be 18. It's time to start thinking about marriage, about settling down. Your mother was married at 19 and she turned out just fine." Malik felt his coffee cup grow cold in his hands. He watched Jasmine's face fall, watched the light drain out of her eyes like water from a cracked vase. "But Dad," she said, and her voice was small now, so small, "I've worked so hard. I've kept my grades up. I've done everything you asked. Please, Dad. This means everything to me." Terrence stood up, and suddenly the room felt smaller, suffocating. "I said no, Jasmine. That's the end of it. Women in this family don't need university education. What would you even do with all that schooling? Study for 8 years just to work in a hospital? You'd miss out on having children. You'd miss out on being a wife. No, I've already been speaking with some families, good families with good sons. We'll find you a husband. That's the proper way." Malik set his coffee cup down and stood up. He could feel the anger building in his chest like a storm, could feel the words pressing against his throat. He was a quiet man by nature, a man who preferred to avoid confrontation, but this was different. This was his niece. This was a child who had worked harder than anyone he'd ever known, who had dreamed bigger than anyone he'd ever met. "Terrence," Malik said, and his voice came out steady, measured, "maybe we should give this some thought. Jasmine has a real future ahead of her. She could be something great. She could help so many people." Terrence turned to his brother, and there was cold fury in his eyes. "Stay out of this, Malik. This is my family. My daughter. I'll decide what's best for her." "But isn't her happiness what's best for her?" Malik pressed. "Don't you want to see her succeed? Don't you want her to have the life she wants?" "I want her to have a good life," Terrence snapped. "A proper life. A life that follows the tradition of our family. Not some modern nonsense about women having careers. Who's going to take care of me when I'm old? Some doctor who's too busy saving strangers? No, a daughter's place is in the home, with her family. That's how it's always been and that's how it's going to be." Malik opened his mouth to argue further, but Terrence cut him off. "And you," he said, pointing a finger at his brother, "I don't want to see you around my house anymore if you can't respect my decisions. This is my family. My rules. If you can't accept that, then maybe you should stay away." The words hung in the air like thunderclouds, heavy and threatening. Malik felt his heart drop into his stomach. He had always been close to Jasmine, had watched her grow up, had seen the potential in her that no one else seemed to notice. And now he was being told that he couldn't see her anymore. It was devastating. But it wasn't just his own pain that made his throat tight. It was Jasmine's. He looked at her standing there, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, and he knew in that moment that he would never forgive his brother for this. He would never forgive Terrence for trying to clip the wings of such a brilliant bird. Jasmine ran out of the room, her footsteps pounding up the stairs, and a moment later they heard her bedroom door slam. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Terrence turned back to his paper, dismissing his brother without another word. Malik stood in the middle of the living room, feeling like a ghost, invisible and powerless. He gathered his coat and walked to the door, and as he stepped out into the cool October night, he heard the lock click behind him. That was the last time he set foot in his brother's house for many years. The weeks that followed were dark ones for Malik. He had always been a man of routine, a creature of habit, but now his routine felt hollow. He did his 12-hour shifts at the office building, walked his endless corridors, wrote his nightly reports. But underneath the surface, something was changing. Something was growing. He couldn't stop thinking about Jasmine. He remembered her as a little girl, sitting in his lap while he read her stories. He remembered the way her eyes would light up when she figured out a difficult math problem. He remembered her graduation from middle school, how she had been the valedictorian, how proud she had made everyone feel. And now all that potential, all that brilliance, was going to be wasted because her father was too stubborn to see past his own narrow vision. Malik didn't sleep well those first few weeks. He would lie in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling, his mind spinning with possibilities. What could he do? He had no money to speak of. He had no influence. He was just a security guard, a nobody in the grand scheme of things. But he was also an uncle who loved his niece more than anything in the world. One night, around 2 in the morning, Malik was making his rounds on the 7th floor of the office building. The building was silent, the way all buildings are at that hour, the only sounds being the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant drone of a cleaning machine in another part of the building. He passed by a row of offices, each one dark and empty, and found himself stopping in front of a door that was slightly ajar. Inside was a law office, the kind of place where important decisions were made, where lives were changed. On the desk was a letter that had been left out, probably by a secretary who had forgotten to file it away. Malik didn't mean to read it, but his eyes caught the word scholarship fund and he found himself drawn in. The letter was from a university, thanking the law firm for its generous donation to a scholarship program for underprivileged students. The law firm had set up a fund that provided full tuition for students who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford college. The letter talked about the transformative power of education, about how giving someone the opportunity to learn was like giving them a whole new life. Malik stood in that dark office, reading that letter by the dim light of the hallway, and felt something click into place. It was like a key turning in a lock, opening a door he hadn't even known existed. What if he could do something similar? What if he could find a way to pay for Jasmine's education without her father ever finding out? It would have to be done in secret, of course. Terrence would never accept the money if he knew it came from Malik. But what if it came from somewhere else? What if it came from an anonymous foundation? The idea seemed crazy at first. Malik barely made enough money to support himself. His apartment was small, his car was old, and he had nothing saved for retirement. How could he possibly save enough to pay for medical school? That was hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was impossible. It was insane. But the thought wouldn't leave him. It stuck with him through the rest of his shift, through the cold walk to his car, through the drive home in the gray dawn. It was there when he opened his front door, there when he made his morning coffee, there when he sat down at his small kitchen table to think. What if he could just pay for the first year? What if he could find a way to get her started, and then maybe other opportunities would present themselves? A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, his mother used to say. She had been a wise woman, his mother, had taught him that the biggest obstacles could be overcome with patience and persistence. Malik reached for a pen and paper, and for the first time in months, he felt a spark of purpose. He started calculating his finances, figuring out how much he could save if he cut back on everything. No more eating out. No more new clothes. No more anything unnecessary. He would take on extra shifts, work all the overtime he could get. If he was careful, if he was disciplined, he might be able to save $50,000 over the next 4 years. It was an insane goal. It was almost impossible. But as Malik sat at his kitchen table, watching the sun rise over the rooftops of the city, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt hope. He felt purpose. He felt like he had a mission. The days that followed were a study in dedication. Malik began working double shifts whenever they were available, sometimes going 36 hours without sleep. He would stagger home, collapse into bed, and wake up just in time to do it all over again. His body protested, of course. His knees ached constantly. His feet developed blisters that turned into calluses. His eyes would sometimes blur from exhaustion, making it hard to focus on his nightly reports. But he didn't complain. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing. This was his secret, his private mission, and he would carry the burden alone. He started eating frugally. His refrigerator, once stocked with reasonable groceries, now held only the basics. Rice. Beans. Some vegetables when they were on sale. He learned to stretch a single meal into two, to make soups and stews that lasted for days. He stopped going out with friends, making excuses about being tired, about having to work early. He became a ghost in his own life, a shadow passing through the days without really touching anything. There were nights when the exhaustion was so overwhelming that he would find himself leaning against the cold walls of the office building, struggling to keep his eyes open. His body would scream for rest, for just a moment of peace. But he would think about Jasmine. He would think about her face when her father had told her she couldn't go to college. He would think about how she had cried in his arms at a family gathering a few weeks later, when she had managed to steal a few minutes alone with him. "Uncle Malik," she had whispered, her tears soaking into his shirt, "I don't know what to do. I've never wanted anything so much in my whole life. And he just won't listen." Malik had held her then, had let her cry, had promised her that everything would be okay. He had no idea how he could keep that promise, but he had made it anyway. And now he was determined to follow through. At home, late at night, when the silence of the apartment pressed in on him, Malik would sit at his kitchen table and count his money. He had opened a separate bank account, one that Terrence didn't know about, and he deposited every extra dollar into it. He would watch the balance grow, dollar by dollar, week by week. It was slow going, painfully slow. But every month, the number got a little bigger. "The bird that is told it cannot fly only needs one person to open the window," he would whisper to himself on the hardest nights. "The bird that is told it cannot fly only needs one person to open the window." It became his mantra, his prayer, his reason for pushing through the exhaustion. Jasmine was that bird. And he was going to be the one who opened the window. The first year of Malik's secret project was the hardest. He was still adjusting to the new rhythm of his life, still learning how to survive on so little sleep and food. There were moments when he nearly gave up, when the exhaustion was so overwhelming that he thought about quitting, about accepting that he had set an impossible goal for himself. One night, around 4 in the morning, he found himself sitting in a chair on the 3rd floor of the office building, staring at nothing. His shift had started at 6 the night before, and he had been on his feet for 10 hours already. His legs were throbbing. His head was pounding. And his heart was heavy with doubt. "What am I doing?" he whispered to the empty corridor. "This is crazy. I can't do this. I'm too old. I'm too tired. Jasmine probably doesn't even want to be a doctor anymore. Her father has probably talked her out of it by now." He sat there in the darkness, feeling his resolve crumbling, feeling the weight of the whole world pressing down on his shoulders. And then, as if by magic, his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. But when he opened it, he knew immediately who had sent it. "Uncle Malik, I don't know if you still check this number. But I wanted you to know that I haven't given up. I've been looking at options, trying to figure out how to make this work. I know it seems impossible, but I'm not going to stop fighting for my dream. I just wanted you to know. Please don't tell my father I texted you. Love, Jasmine." Malik read that message 3 times. And by the 3rd time, the tears were streaming down his face. He had never been so proud of anyone in his entire life. Here was his niece, facing impossible odds, and she still refused to give up. How could he do anything less? He typed back a quick response. "Keep fighting, sweetheart. The window will open. I promise." Then he got up, straightened his uniform, and went back to work. The second year brought new challenges. Terrence had begun actively looking for a husband for Jasmine, bringing potential suitors to the house for dinners and meetings. Malik heard about it through the family grapevine, through whispers from cousins and aunts who were loyal to him. They told him stories of Jasmine sitting through these dinners with a forced smile, her eyes dead and lifeless. They told him how she would excuse herself as soon as possible, retreating to her room to be alone. It broke Malik's heart every time he heard a new story. But it also strengthened his resolve. He had to succeed. He had to find a way to give Jasmine the life she deserved. He increased his saving efforts, taking on even more overtime. His health began to suffer, but he pushed through it. He started having chest pains occasionally, sharp stabbing sensations that would pass after a few minutes. He knew he should see a doctor, but he couldn't afford the time or the money. Every penny had to go into the scholarship fund. One evening, he was walking to the bus stop after a particularly grueling shift when he saw a young man playing the guitar on a street corner. The man had a sign that read, "Save what you can. Give what you can. Together, we make a difference." The man wasn't collecting money for himself, but for a children's hospital. Malik stopped to listen. The music was beautiful, simple and melodic, and it seemed to speak directly to his soul. When the song ended, he walked over to the man and handed him $10. "That's all I can spare," Malik said. "But I wanted to say that what you're doing is admirable. Helping others when you have so little yourself. That takes courage." The man smiled, revealing a mouthful of crooked teeth. "Everyone can do something, brother. It's not about how much you give. It's about giving it all. Every kindness, no matter how small, makes the world a better place." Malik nodded, feeling the truth of those words in his bones. He went home that night and calculated how much he had saved so far. It wasn't nearly enough, but it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, that was what mattered most. The 3rd year brought a series of unexpected obstacles. Malik's car, which had been a faithful companion for 15 years, finally gave out. The engine was beyond repair. He couldn't afford a new car, so he started taking the bus, which added an extra hour to his commute each way. He found himself waking up even earlier, getting home even later, and his exhaustion reached new depths. But he refused to complain. He knew that his struggle was nothing compared to what Jasmine was going through. She was still fighting her father, still refusing to accept his plans for her life. They had grown distant, but she had found allies among other family members. Her mother, though powerless against her husband's authority, would occasionally slip her small amounts of money. Her cousins would offer words of encouragement. But Malik knew that his niece was fighting an uphill battle. One night, Malik received another text from the unknown number. "Uncle Malik, I've been accepted to the State University's pre-med program. I don't have the money to go, but I got in. I did it. Even though he told me not to, I applied anyway. I just wanted you to know. I didn't give up." Malik read the message and wept for the second time in 3 years. She had done it. Despite everything, Jasmine had found the strength to apply, to put herself out there, to refuse to give up on her dreams. She was remarkable. She was incredible. She was everything he had always known she could be. He needed to tell her. He needed to let her know that her dream was going to become a reality. But he couldn't. Not yet. It wasn't time. The secret was still too important, still too necessary. If Terrence found out what he was doing, he would find a way to stop it. He would block the money, block the scholarship, block everything. No, Malik had to keep this secret for just a little while longer. But he allowed himself to type a response. "Congratulations, sweetheart. You've made me so proud. Keep going. Don't stop. The window is almost open." The 4th year was the most difficult of all. Malik's health continued to decline, and the chest pains became more frequent. He knew he was pushing his body to its limits, knew that he was probably doing damage that couldn't be undone. But he couldn't stop. He was so close. The scholarship fund had grown beyond his wildest expectations. He had saved more than he ever thought possible. He had also made a discovery that changed everything. Through his work at the office building, he had come across a small, unknown foundation that provided educational grants for promising students in the community. The foundation was run by a wealthy widow named Mrs. Francis, a woman who had lost her husband to cancer and wanted to help others who were suffering. Malik had spoken to her about his project, had explained his situation without revealing too many details, and she had been moved by his dedication. "I have contacts at the university," she told him. "I could set up a scholarship in your name, a real one, that would cover most of Jasmine's expenses. All you need to do is provide the initial funding. The rest will be handled through the foundation." Malik had been stunned. He had never expected this. Mrs. Francis had taken his idea and run with it, expanding it into something much bigger than he could have imagined. With her help, Jasmine's education would be fully funded for all 4 years of medical school. And so, in the spring of 2018, Malik transferred all of his savings into the foundation account. He handed over every single penny he had earned during those 4 long years of double shifts and frugal living. It was the largest sum of money he had ever seen, and he gave it away without hesitation. He didn't keep a single dollar for himself. He didn't even think about it. All that mattered was that Jasmine would have the chance she deserved. The window was finally open. Graduation day arrived on a sweltering June morning. The medical school had rented out the city's largest convention center to accommodate the thousands of family members and friends who had come to celebrate. The air was thick with excitement, the stage decked out in banners and balloons, the seats filled with proud mothers and fathers and siblings and uncles. Malik arrived early, choosing a seat in the back, wanting to observe before the chaos began. He had a special letter in his pocket, one he had written and rewritten 100 times, trying to find the right words to say. He was nervous, more nervous than he'd been in years. What would Jasmine think when she found out the truth? Would she be grateful or angry? Would she understand why he had kept the secret for so long? The ceremony was long and emotional. The dean gave a speech about the importance of medicine, about the sacred trust between doctors and patients. One of the top students gave a speech about the journey that had brought them all to this moment. There were tears and laughter and applause. And then, finally, it was time for the graduates to walk across the stage. Malik watched Jasmine approach the podium, her cap and gown flowing behind her. She had grown into a beautiful woman, confident and poised, her eyes shining with pride. As she received her diploma, she turned to the crowd and waved, and Malik felt his heart swell with love. He thought about all the nights he had spent walking those cold corridors, all the meals he had skipped, all the pain he had endured. It had all been worth it. Every single moment. For this. For her. When the ceremony was over, Malik made his way through the crowd, searching for his niece. He found her surrounded by family members, all of them hugging and crying and celebrating. Terrence was there too, looking uncomfortable but forcing a smile. He had been forced to accept his daughter's achievement, but there was still a tightness in his jaw, a coldness in his eyes. But when Malik approached, Terrence stepped aside. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The look on his face was enough. Jasmine turned and saw her uncle, and her face lit up with joy. "Uncle Malik!" she cried, rushing over to embrace him. "You came. I didn't think you would, after everything with Dad. You came." "I wouldn't miss this for the world," Malik said, hugging her tightly. "I am so proud of you, Jasmine. So incredibly proud." She pulled back, wiping tears from her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you for always believing in me. I don't know how I would have made it through these years without your support." Malik reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter. "I have something for you," he said. "Something I've been waiting a long time to give you." Jasmine took the letter, confusion flickering in her eyes. "What's this?" "Just read it," Malik said softly. "And then you'll understand everything." Jasmine opened the letter and began to read. The words that had taken Malik so long to write flowed across the page. "My dearest Jasmine, I have watched you grow from a curious child into a remarkable young woman. I have seen you face every obstacle with courage and grace. And I have had the privilege of watching you achieve something that was once thought impossible. I have been your secret benefactor for the past 4 years. Every penny of your scholarship was paid for by me. I know this might come as a shock, but I hope you understand why I did it. I wanted to open the window for you. I wanted to show you that even when the world says you can't fly, there is always someone who believes you can." Jasmine's eyes widened as she read. Her hands began to shake. "Uncle Malik," she whispered, "I don't understand. How? Where did you get the money?" "I've been working double shifts as a security guard for 4 years," Malik admitted. "I worked every extra hour I could, saved every penny I could, and gave it all to a foundation that provided your scholarship. I wanted you to have the education you deserved. I wanted you to be able to follow your dreams, no matter what anyone else said." Jasmine was crying openly now, the tears streaming down her face. "You did all that? For me? Uncle Malik, that's incredible. That's the most amazing thing anyone has ever done for me." Malik reached out and took her hand. "I did not do this to hurt your father," he said quietly. "I did not do this to cause any trouble in the family. I did this because a bird that is told it cannot fly only needs one person to open the window. Now, fly, Jasmine. Use everything you've learned. All that hard work, all that sacrifice. And if you become a doctor, treat your father when he is old and sick. That is the real kindness, being good to him when he showed none." Jasmine stared at her uncle for a long moment. Then she threw her arms around him and held him tight. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Malik said. "Just live your life the way you've always wanted to. That's all I could ever ask for." Terrence had been watching from a few feet away, listening to the exchange. His face was unreadable, his emotions hidden behind years of rigid discipline. But then, slowly, something changed. His shoulders sagged. His eyes glistened. And for the first time in many years, he looked truly remorseful. "Malik," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to speak with you. Privately." Malik nodded and followed his brother to a quiet corner of the convention center, away from the crowds and the noise. Terrence stood there, looking lost, looking uncertain. It was the first time Malik had ever seen his brother so vulnerable. "I want to pay you back," Terrence said. "Every cent you spent on her education. I want to give it back to you. You shouldn't have had to sacrifice so much for something that was my responsibility." Malik shook his head. "No. That money was a gift. It wasn't a loan. I gave it freely, and I don't want it back." "Please," Terrence said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "Please let me do this. I've been so wrong about everything. I thought I was protecting her by keeping her close, by keeping her safe. But I was just pushing her away. I was just holding her back. And you saw what she needed. You gave her what I couldn't." "The money is not what matters," Malik said gently. "What matters is that Jasmine is here today. She graduated. She's going to be a doctor. And she's happy. That's what matters." Terrence looked away, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry for everything. For shutting you out. For not listening. For trying to clip her wings." Malik put a hand on his brother's shoulder. "We can't change the past," he said. "But we can change the future. We can start building bridges again, if you want. It starts with kindness. Always starts with kindness." Jasmine walked over to them, her face still wet with tears but a radiant smile on her face. She hesitated for a moment, looking between her father and her uncle, then stepped forward and hugged them both tightly. "I love you both," she said. "And I want us to be a family again. A real family. One that supports each other and builds each other up." And so, the story of Malik and Jasmine came full circle. The man who had been excluded from his own family had found a way to break down the walls through generosity and love. The girl who had been told she couldn't fly had discovered that she had wings all along. And the brother who had been consumed by pride had finally been humbled by the actions of a man who loved more than he hated. Malik went home that night with a heart full of peace. The revenge he had taken was not one of anger or bitterness. It was the quiet revenge of kindness. It was the revenge of showing someone that love is stronger than pride, that compassion is more powerful than control, that the greatest victory is not in defeating others but in helping them become the best versions of themselves. He sat in his small apartment, the same apartment where he had dreamed of opening a window for a bird that refused to give up. And he knew that everything had been worth it. Every sleepless night, every ache, every sacrifice. He had done something beautiful, something that would echo through generations. He had changed a life. And in doing so, he had changed himself. And what of Jasmine? She became a doctor, a brilliant one, and she kept her promise. She treated her father when he was old and sick, with the same compassion she showed to all her patients. And Terrence, who had once been so unyielding, grew into a kinder man, a man who finally understood that the greatest gift a parent can give a child is not control but wings. This story is for all the Maliks out there, the quiet ones, the patient ones, the ones who work in the shadows to build a better world for someone else. It's for all the Jasmines, the dreamers, the fighters, the ones who refuse to give up on themselves even when the world says they should. And it's for all the Terrences, the ones who can still change, who can still grow, who can still learn to see with new eyes. Because in the end, that's what this story is really about. It's about opening windows. It's about believing in possibilities. It's about the kind of love that asks nothing in return. It's about the quiet power of doing good when no one is watching. And it's about the healing that comes when we finally understand that the real revenge is not getting even, it's rising above. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Sometimes the smallest act of sharing can open a window for someone who feels trapped. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to our channel, so you never miss another story that reminds us all of the goodness that exists in this world. Together, we can spread these messages of hope, forgiveness, and the kind of love that changes everything.